Disability assessors worldwide are misunderstanding their own rules, and it's preventing people with disabilities from accessing the help they desperately need. The rule says if you can only do something once, or on a good day, or under pressure, then you are unable. But assessors everywhere will search for one incident where you pushed yourself, where you injured yourself, not because you're able to perform a task, but because you had no choice but to. And they'll hold that example up and say, aha, so you can do it after all. And they use that example to prevent us from accessing all the support we need. I will explain this in the context of Australia and my own personal story, but only as an example of what happens to disabled people all over the world. Though the wording varies, the same question is always asked to decide if we are eligible for support. What are we able to do? But what does being able mean? I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. Imagine if we expected wheelchair users to climb stairs by pulling themselves up on the handrail. Technically, many wheelchair users could do this. Sure, it would be difficult, it would be slow, it would be humiliating and dangerous, but they could. Does this mean they're able? Absolutely not. And I think everyone would agree with this. So obviously able does not mean technically able, no matter how unreasonable. And it's really important to be clear about this because so many disability systems worldwide have some version of this question, this test. The question is asked whenever we try to access welfare, insurance, workplace and schooling accommodation, support workers and mobility aids. So obviously, getting the answer to this question wrong has devastating consequences for people with disabilities. People with invisible or fluctuating disabilities suffer especially, though I am not naive enough to think that this issue is limited to them. If an assessor can locate even one example of us doing the task, no matter how unable we are to repeat it, or the harm the task may have caused us, well, then we're clearly able because we did it. This error, this expectation that is as reasonable as expecting a wheelchair user to pull themselves upstairs, happens all the time. We've all done the equivalent of pulling ourselves up the stairs at some point, not because it was easy or safe, but because we had to. The good news is that the concept of ability is often clearly explained in writing. The bad news is that this often doesn't make a difference. Let me give you a personal example. To access disability welfare payments, I had to be considered unable to do several things. There were written guidelines for deciding what unable meant. The wording has changed slightly over the years, though the intended meaning has stayed the same. Currently it's phrased like this. When deciding whether a descriptor applies that involves a person performing an activity, the descriptor applies if that person can complete or sustain the activity when they would be expected to do so, and not only once or rarely. For me to access welfare, I had to be considered unable to take public transport by myself, among other things. But I also had to attend a meeting in the CBD to appeal for my eligibility at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. I was broke and couldn't afford a taxi, so I took public transport. I have ME/CFS, myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome, a condition that causes severe worsening of symptoms after exertion. During the meeting, I explained to the assessor that I don't usually go anywhere, that I live on university campus and stay on campus, that this was the first time I'd left the campus in a long time, that attending the meeting would come at a huge physical cost to me and would require an extended recovery time. After that meeting, I was close to bedbound for weeks, suffering the extreme physical repercussions of my attending the meeting. Then I received a letter in the mail. Application declined. The reason provided was as follows, and I quote directly. Annie travelled to the tribunal unassisted. However, as this is quite taxing, she will have to return home immediately and rest. She would not be able to undertake such an activity every day. The tribunal accepts that these activities cause fatigue to Annie, and after completing them she must rest. Nevertheless, she is able to do them. They acknowledged that I could only travel once as an exception. They acknowledged the cost. And then they took my attendance as proof of ability anyway. So what does ability really look like? It looks like being able to do something without harm. It means being able to do a task with dignity. It means being able to perform the task whenever needed and not just on a good day, not just once, and not just because we had no other choice. To define it any other way is to expect harm that leads to greater dependence. When you expect these things of us, you dehumanize us. And I don't think it's because most assessors mean to do this. They just misunderstand. And it's unfortunately a very harmful misunderstanding. We need our government assessors, our doctors, our teachers, our employers, who decide what help we do or don't get, to understand this. Because when they don't, that's when we end up with people with disability struggling. That's when we deny them the quality of life that our societies promise, not because it's fair or because we mean to, but because of a misunderstanding. This isn't a problem unique to me or to Australia or to the one assessor who denied me. This is a global misunderstanding that occurs in numerous systems that decide who gets help and who doesn't. This misunderstanding needs to be fixed, and it is fixable. If you're disabled and this resonates, please share your story below. It helps others understand how widespread this problem is and why it matters.